Hello and welcome to the Kongversation. I'm Hyle Russell.
And I am Dustin Jackson.
And on this episode of the Kongversation, we're escaping into the wilderness. We're going up the mountain paths of Donkey Kong Island into the forested valley beneath Gorilla Glacier. Yes, we'll be looking at the history and lore of Vine Valley, the third world of Donkey Kong Country.
Woo! Hyle, you know, if there's one thing you know about me, it's that I love escaping. So I feel like this is going to be a good episode.
You love escaping as far as travel. You love escaping rooms. You love being locked in and figuring your way out.
Or if I've been incarcerated, I just get out of there and it's fun.
Yeah, it's always feels good. So before we get into Vine Valley, look, there's no due diligence this week. I'm not in the mood to shill our Patreon or a video or a t-shirt.
As great as they are.
Yeah, that's all there if you want it. You can support us, you can watch our stuff, you can buy our clothes, and it's always appreciated when you do. But it just doesn't feel, appropriate this week because I know, I know a lot of you are feeling anxious, feeling scared right now, despondent even, angry. I'll allow angry. And don't worry, I'm not getting political here. This isn't me getting up on my little soapbox or anything. I'm not going to say anything untoward. And believe me, I know everyone can use an escape right now, can use a refuge or a distraction from everything that's going on at this moment in time, me included. I reached out to Dustin a couple days ago and I was like, Dustin, do you want to try to do the podcast this weekend? And with everything happening at the moment, I just really wanted to quickly talk and address our audience, our lovely, lovely audience. And I said a short version of all of this on Wednesday on Blue Sky, but I'd be at fault if I didn't communicate it to our Kongversation listeners as well. Because I know things are rough for a lot of you right now. And I just wanted to assure everyone listening that as long as I continue to draw breath, I will do everything in my power to keep DK Vine, the Kongversation, and the larger Donkey Kong and Rare fan community a safe, welcoming, inclusive community that's built on love and respect.
Thank you, Hyle.
Yeah, you're welcome, Dustin. I've said so many times now that the best part of my job is getting to connect with people from all around the world who have a shared passion for this nonsense. And I know it's nonsense. I know they're wonderful, but they're goofy video games. But they're video games that can cross cultural and language barriers and strike a chord with people from all manner of backgrounds.
Right, everyone can appreciate a gorilla wearing a necktie.
Yeah, or a bear wearing a backpack with a bird stuffed inside. These are things that are somehow universal. They can cross cultural barriers. They can bring us together. And Donkey Kong, Banjo-Kazooie, Conker, Ukulele, it's all so dumb, but damn it, it's something special at the same time. And that worldwide unification, that diversity of our audience, I absolutely love it. I love connecting with people. I love learning from people, and I love broadening my own horizons. My world is all the richer by forming bonds with people across nations, across continents, different religious or lack thereof, sexual backgrounds. For all of the ills of the internet and social media, it's been one of the largest net gains in my life since I first dialed up back in the 1990s. And I need everyone listening to this to know, whether you're just somebody who listens and is just quiet about it, who doesn't engage with the larger community, or someone who's very active in this community, that so long as you bring the same kind of love and acceptance for others in your heart into this, you are absolutely welcome here. And I know that the world doesn't make sense a lot of times. Our faith in people, in our neighbors, or even our own families can sometimes be misguided, and we're left hurt as a result. But I do believe in the power of community, even if it's not a traditional community. I know the pandemic did a number on our collective mental health, and it made us all a lot more isolated as a result. And obviously, developing a parasocial relationship with people hosting podcasts has been shown to have disastrous results. But if you're listening to this and you are scared or you feel alone, please know that you're not alone. Not really. Even when you feel outnumbered, you have so many people around the world who are feeling just like you are at this moment. And if I can do anything to help provide comfort, even just a small measure of it, or a welcome distraction in the coming weeks and months ahead, I am happy to do it. I don't want to be cliched.
Right.
I just hope you know that DK Vine will be a safe space for you. And it's accepting for you who you are. It doesn't matter. Right? We welcome you. And if you need that, or you just need to turn off the real world for a couple of hours, that's what I'll be. And I know that over the last 25 years, we've often had a history of making light of current events, whether it's here on the Kongversation or throughout the rest of our data performance art / video game coverage. And part of that is just because many of us who have worked on DK Vine over the years are news junkies or even political science majors. But another part of that is just our penchant for gallows humor, trying to whistle through the darkness. But I completely get that we all need a reprieve at times. So like the world is scary right now, and you don't really need to be hearing jokes about how scary it is. So I will do my best to refrain from making those types of jokes, at least for the foreseeable future. When I say DK Vine will be a safe space, I will try to live by my own words. If I do have to engage in that type of humor, I'll just get very old school with it, Dustin, because I've got a whole stack of Huey Long jokes I've never even used.
Man, finally, the opportunity has presented itself.
Dustin.
Yes, Hyle.
What do you call Huey Long's 1929 impeachment over the 5-cent barrel tax?
I couldn't possibly know, Hyle.
Huey Long barrel blast. Ha ha!
Oh, my goodness gracious.
I killed him all over again.
That's what humor is when you think about it.
And look, if you do need someone to talk to and you don't feel like you have anybody, you can always reach out to me. DK Vine is on Blue Sky. It's very easy to send me a message there. I can't promise I'll be able to get back to you right away. I'm very bad at that. I admit it. I will read a reply or a message, and sometimes it'll be days before I get back to it because I'm scatterbrained. I'm the absent-minded professor of Donkey Kong. And, it's one of my shortcomings as a person, but I will try. I will make the effort. I know it's very easy for me, being, a white, heterosexual, cisgendered man, to sit here and spout off simple platitudes. But I do want to be a better ally for everyone. I want to be a better leader for this community. 8 years ago, I did not have my shit together yet. And that's when the process of me actually growing up really kicked in. And I'm still a work in progress. We all are. But I will be here. And I would just want to remind everyone who listens that you all mean so much to me. Even if I've never spoken to you, I just appreciate you. And don't forget to let the people in your life know the exact same thing, because we all need to hear it right now. Dustin, I love you.
Hey, you know what, Hyle? I love you too. You're a cool guy. DK Vine, you know what? This DK Vine thing might be pretty all right.
I mean, you know, we might need another 25 years or so to really be sure. But
yeah, you know, by that point, maybe we can say, yeah, it's not bad.
Yeah. You know, I guess there's no time like the present to start figuring out. So shall we go to Vine Valley?
I'd love to, Hyle. You know how much I love Vine Valley.
I do too. Donkey Kong Country's third world. Of course, Donkey Kong Country turns 30 years old later this month. And we've got a slew of podcast topics and working on a video about it. But we're going to talk about Vine Valley today in our Destination DKU sub-series here on the Kongversation. And in my opinion, Vine Valley, this is where Donkey Kong Country really begins to get interesting. I think when you, the player, if you go in cold to Donkey Kong Country and you don't really know anything about it except the most vague details, I think this is really when the game sets in for you. And you understand it's not just jungles and caves and coral and temples, but you'll actually be getting into some diverse climates. Like there are like different types of forests. There are different types of nature archetypes in this game. And it's where Donkey Kong Country and Donkey Kong Island, I think, really become exciting as a setting, because you start to feel like anything is possible and you can't wait to discover what's next.
Right, yeah. Like, I wouldn't have necessarily expected a forest world in a game where we already have, like, a vast jungle world. Yeah. But I like that I get that variety.
Yeah, like scaling the mountain on the islands and having that biodiversity change. I really like how the game does this. And this is something that I think Rare has always done well. Well, to a certain extent. Because they always provide a somewhat logical manner to how their environmental storytelling works. You know, some games in the past, they would just have like, okay, the first world is just like grassy hills. The second world is then just a desert. And then you're like in an ocean, and then I don't know.
Then you get the volcano world.
Yeah.
Then you're in outer space.
Yeah, like it's just like a series of settings, but I think I was drawn upon Super Mario Brothers 3 there, because to me it just I can't really get a sense of how the world or why the world is laid out the way it is. It's just presented to you as a matter of fact, where in Donkey Kong Country, you know, you just understand that you are getting higher up and the climate is changing, but it all takes place on the same island, which really makes that an interesting location, an interesting locale. And it really makes you, I think, more invested in the game world itself.
I totally agree. I mean, this is a whole different subject altogether, but you know, I've said before, that's kind of why I prefer Banjo-Tooie over Banjo-Kazooie, is it has a little more of that world logic to it.
Yeah, and of course, we'll be talking about Banjo-Tooie a little bit this month too here on the Kongversation.
Yeah, but the Donkey Kong Country games have that very well as well.
Yeah. Banjo-Tooie just came out on NSO, and I have been rediscovering my passion for it. And one of the things I've really been reminded of is that environmental storytelling and how the Isle Hags really feels like a living, breathing place. I mean, a weird place, but a place that still has that logic, however strained it is. And it's something I really appreciate about the Donkey Kong Country games, from Donkey Kong Island to Crocodile Isle to the Northern Hemisphere. It really does feel like each setting is like a real world that actually exists or keeps existing when you turn off your console.
Yeah, exactly. I love that about it.
I said we'd be talking about the lore of Vine Valley, Dustin. And to be fair, there isn't really much concrete set in stone lore about Vine Valley. What does the Donkey Kong Country instruction manual have to say about Vine Valley? Well, in the first page of the instruction manual's so-called atlas, it says this about just Donkey Kong Country in particular. You'll find a wide variety of ecosystems in Donkey Kong Country. Though the island itself is mainly tropical, there are great pine forests on the slopes of snow-capped peaks. The mountains are riddled with mines, natural tunnels, and caves. Surrounding the island are many tropical lagoons full of reefs and colorful fish. Following are general descriptions of each area. And there is a general description, not of Vine Valley itself, but of the Treetop Town level template, which we'll be getting into.
That's interesting they would single out that one over anything else in this world.
I guess it's more interesting to talk about an Ewok village than it is just to talk about trees.
I guess that's true.
I mean, don't get me wrong, Dustin. I love trees. I would sit here and talk about the trees of Donkey Kong Island until well after midnight. I would do that. But I think for Dan Owson, the Nintendo of America employee who wrote the instruction manuals to Donkey Kong Country and Donkey Kong Country 2, the Ewok Village was probably a little bit more fun to craft a paragraph about.
Right. Trees, yeah, I seen them. But people living in trees, there we go.
Trees, yeah, I've seen them. So Vine Valley, of course, as I said, it's the third world after Congo Jungle and Monkey Mines. And Vine Valley, it's a bit deceptive, Dustin, because our memories of Vine Valley and what actually happens in the game, I think it tends to be a little bit skewed. Do you know what I'm talking about here?
No, what do you mean?
Okay. The actual Vine Valley, the temperate forest, it only comprises the first 3 levels of the actual Vine Valley world.
Oh, that's okay. I get what you mean now. That's true. I just played through it before we did the show. Yeah, the levels that actually have anything to do with this forest are all at the beginning.
Yeah, once you actually get through the 3rd stage of Vine Valley, you cross a bridge to a neighboring islet off the coast of Donkey Kong Island. Because, of course, Donkey Kong Island isn't just Donkey Kong Island, it's the DK Isles. And the rest of the world takes place on that islet, or in the ocean between the two. And yeah, you forget, because Vine Valley, it just leaves such an impression on you from those first 3 levels. And I'm not saying the back half doesn't leave a similar impression, but your brain focuses on the forest, the Treetop Town, and it kind of displaces the fact that Orangutan Gang or Temple Tempest or Clam City are also part of that world, and yet thematically they have nothing to do with the world itself.
Right. Clam City makes me laugh. That's just a good name for a level.
Is it a pun, Dustin?
I don't know if it's a pun. I think I like it. There's lots of those clams in there, so I wonder if they were like, oh, well, we came up with all these other great names for these levels, but this one, you just call it Clam City. We get it. There's
not even alliteration there. It's they both start with
C. They both
C.
start with C, but the sound is not the same.
Right. So I'm wondering if there's a place in the UK in Twycross that's called Clam City, it's a seafood restaurant or something. And
I could see that,
because there's a lot of times in these games where there's a reference that I'm growing up in the States, I'm I don't understand what that is. Donkey Kong Land 3 had a few of those. And And then come to find out, it's a very local reference that they shoehorned in. So it could be that, or I also just am really fond of the idea that they were lazy and they couldn't think of a good name. They're like, Clam City. Done.
Just call it Clam City.
It's a bunch of clams. It's a clam city. I don't fucking care.
It's like a city full of clams.
The game has to ship next week. Let's just get it in there. So while both the sloping pine forest on the main island and the separate islets both fall under the Vine Valley world, I'm going to argue something here, and I've argued this in the past. I've recently argued it in a DKU lore tour video. I think that Vine Valley proper is just those first 3 levels, and Funky's Flights is also on Vine Valley. And the islet is its own region of the DK Isles. And, do you know where I'm going with this?
I don't think I do, Hyle, but I'm excited to find out.
Okay. So the German Donkey Kong 64 website, which is a dubious source of canon, but it's provided us a lot of fun in-jokes over the years, like the whole thing with Tiny Kong being a tax official, comes from the German Donkey Kong 64 website. You're like, what? But on Lanky Kong's biography, it says the following. To the satisfaction of the other Kongs, Lanky has been at home on the DK Islands for some time now. Originally, he comes from the more distant Utan Islands, where relatives of the Kongs live. The society there was much too boring and conservative for Lanky, however, so that he was attracted to the slightly chaotic members of the Kong clan. So, of course, it's a bit of a stretch. But so is Lanky, am I right?
Hey!
Could this separate island, this small islet with the tropical jungles, could that be the Utan Island that supposedly, according to the German Donkey Kong 64 website, Lanky Kong originated from? Because, of course, Orangutan Gang is on that small island. And when you talk about the society there being too boring and conservative and uptight for Lanky, could that be in reference to the Manky Kongs? Who are,
it could be. He could be. He left those Manky Kongs.
Yeah. We know that the Manky Kongs are like Kong rejects, according to the same instruction manual. And by the way, we will be getting into the instruction manual a little bit more in a few weeks' time. We're going to do a whole episode about the Donkey Kong Country instruction manual. So that will be fun. But yeah, like I think it's, of course, with anything out of a video game, like in a manual or in a website, you have to take it with a grain of salt. It can always be retconned. It can always be ignored. It's, again, a dubious source of canon. But I think you can draw from these things to further your understanding. So long as it doesn't contradict anything within the games themselves, I don't see the harm in it. And I think that
as long as they don't come out and say, like, no, that part is definitely not Utan Isle.
yeah. The next Donkey Kong game actually starts with like Cranky Kong giving a speech saying Utan Island is a hoax. It never existed.
They put a sign on that part of the world saying, "This is anywhere except Utan Isle."
Yeah. This is actually this is actually Prince Edward Island, and Donkey Kong Island takes place off of Canada.
Wow, I never would have known.
Yeah, blows my mind. But yeah, I think that, yeah, I like to think this is Utan Island. I think that's a perfectly fine, like, bit of nonsense from the German Donkey Kong 64 website that I'm happy to incorporate into my own understanding of this universe.
Yeah, exactly. Why not?
And it was clear from the Game Boy Advance remake. Because the Game Boy Advance remake of Donkey Kong Country, they redid all of the map screens. So they wouldn't just be static renders that the characters, like, move across. They actually put some effort into recontextualizing them as actual spaces that the characters go through. And what I really like in the GBA remake is that they really, like, leaned into the Kremlantis era Kremlin temples and statues, because Temple Tempest is on what we call Utan Island. And so they really, like, established that as, like, a Kremlantis outpost by having the bridge to the island from Vine Valley be flanked by, like, Kremlin centurions or whatever holding spears. And like they really, like, focused on the temples with the, like, Kremlin heads on the pillars, and they even, like, showed that there's some encroachment into Vine Valley itself with, like, sculpted like, stairways and, you know, a little bit of architecture that we never actually see in the levels themselves. But I do like that.
Right.
I do like that extra bit of detail that doesn't really contradict the original too much. Of course, the original shows that there's, like, a wooden step bridge over the ocean to the island, and then the GBA remake says, no, it's actually, like, a full-on bridge across the sea, like a stone bridge.
Right.
But maybe there's more than one bridge, or, you know, maybe we just...
I think the only thing I don't really care for with this GBA version is it while it does up the temple parts, which is cool, it downplays the actual forest part, like, a lot.
Yeah, I think obviously the Super Nintendo version of Donkey Kong Country will always be the preeminent version, which we have to draw our conclusions from. The GBA remakes are cool, and they are canon, but really, you have to weigh them separately. Like, this SNES version will always take priority over the GBA remake, just because that's what's going to be drawn from when you call back to Donkey Kong Country. And so, the forest is really more of a focus in the SNES version, and Utan Island is really more of the focus in the GBA version. Really weird. But you know, it's kind of cool when you, like, mash them together. You can really get a good sense of both locations.
Yeah, totally.
Now, let's talk a little bit though about the levels in Vine Valley from the original Donkey Kong Country, and the two actual forest levels, the ones that we think of when we think of Vine Valley. More or less, when you hear that, you know, wonderful music in your head.
Love it.
You know it.
Oh, I know, Hyle.
So the first level of Vine Valley is Vulture Culture, and the third level in Vine Valley, and the last forest level in Donkey Kong Country. Weirdly, just two. You would think there'd be a third one.
Just the two.
But no. We had 16 caves, 32 mines, but two forests. Okay, whatever. Forest Frenzy is the second forest level, the third level in the world. Now, Vulture Culture, for those who aren't aware, for those who aren't music nerds, is actually named after the 1985 studio album by the Alan Parsons Project, Vulture Culture.
Wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah. Now, Alan Parsons, of course, got a start as an EMI engineer, and he was an engineer during the Beatles' Get Back sessions, which, of course, became the album Let It Be, and Abbey Road. So there's your Beatles connection to Vine Valley, Dustin.
Wow, thanks, Hyle.
You're welcome.
I knew if anyone could do it, it would be you.
Yeah. Of course, you know, you can really tell, I guess, the age of the people making Donkey Kong Country, or, you know, their general location, because I don't think the Alan Parsons Project, by the time 1985 rolled around, they weren't big in the States or as preeminent as they were. Vulture culture did do well in Europe, though. So really like elevated that terminology for 90s kids in North America, in South America. Like, I don't know what it was translated to in other languages, but yeah, I was like, vulture culture, that's a fun, like, rhyming name. And then, you know, you get a little bit older and you understand its significance, not just for Alan Parsons, but also just referencing our own consumerist culture. But
right. And also, it has vultures in it.
Yeah, it has neckies
so,
in it, which is their justification.
Pretty good.
For it.
Yeah, pretty smart.
Now, it makes sense that they would like load up the neckies in the forest, because vultures, you know, they are a common sight anywhere there is an abundance of wildlife that will meet its unfortunate end, because vultures, of course, feast on their carcasses. Now, I believe, it's just my general understanding of the lore of Donkey Kong, that every animal species aligned with the Kremlin crew, including neckies, are actually native to Crocodile Isle. And it doesn't mean that they don't like roost in Vine Valley. Of course, especially once Crocodile Isle goes explodey, they have to find a home somewhere. So I think Vine Valley would make as good a place as any for them to like migrate to. But I don't think neckies are originally indigenous to Donkey Kong Island.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, but they are kind of synonymous with Vine Valley because of vulture culture. And they also appear in Forest Frenzy, although zingers are quite abundant in Forest Frenzy too. I think Forest Frenzy...
Hate them in there.
Yeah, I think Forest Frenzy was the first level where I really felt the difficulty ratchet up a significant degree.
Yeah, definitely. Like, even as a kid, I remember that being the stage where I'm like, shit, here's the part where you gotta dodge all the zingers, and then there's also the part where the neckies are all coming in from the right side, and you gotta dodge them. Oh.
That was, I think, the most difficult part of the game until Gorilla Glacier. For me, like, that was where I was like, oh, I don't know if I can do this. And that's really where I started to get better. And not just Donkey Kong Country, but video games in general. It was a learning experience because I loved the game so much, I wanted to actually beat it. And it was just one of those things where you get a little bit better each time you play it until eventually you figure out the patterns, you figure out the strategy, and then it becomes second nature. But yeah, it was Forest Frenzy. That was really where I got stuck for... I don't even know how long it was. You know, probably no more than a day, but it was definitely like, oh, wow, this is just a gauntlet of the baddies flying in.
It's not like it's some, like, incredible Herculean task, but it's tricky.
Yeah.
And I don't mean the Triceratops, Hyle.
No, he was over in Dino Domain at the time.
Yeah, that's a different one.
Before we talk about the second level and the other archetype of this initial selection of Vine Valley stages, what do you think of the forest in general in the original Donkey Kong Country? These two stages, like the general appearance of the forest.
I like it. It's very earthy colors. It's a little soothing.
It is. I like how it's dense. It doesn't feel the same as the jungle stages. It feels a little bit darker just because it feels like the trees are just covering up more of the sky. You've almost got this amber appearance in the sky. And it really just communicates to you, the player, that you're in a slightly cooler, at the very least, climate. And yeah, it just, it really does a good job of making you feel like you are getting higher up on the island. maybe this territory is a little bit more unfamiliar to Donkey Kong and therefore a little bit more unforgiving, but it still has that kind of hominess, that kind of soothing, like, nature aesthetic that, like, puts you at ease even as the difficulty really starts to nip at your heels a little bit.
Right. I just love that feeling of just being, like, surrounded by these giant trees that just tower over you.
Yeah.
It's fun. It's cool.
And yeah, I think that, like, generally speaking, Vine Valley, the two forests might be one of my favorite archetypes of Donkey Kong Country, but I can't say it's actually one of my favorites because we spend so little time in it. I almost wish there was a third forest level that did a little bit more, because it just...
I agree, just something to get you a little more familiar with this part. Yeah. Make it feel like more of a presence.
Yeah, and again, it's kind of a sleight of hand the Donkey Kong Country pulls, because you remember that forest world, and you just forget that you spend so little time in the actual forest.
Yeah.
Treetop Town helps kind of bridge the two levels, though, and it kind of helps build up that legend in your mind. Now, what does the instruction manual have to say about Treetop Town? Because I alluded to the fact earlier that the instruction manual does have a dedicated space in the atlas for the treetops, as it calls it. Dustin, would you like to read what Dan Owson of Nintendo of America said about the Treetop Towns?
I would love nothing more, Hyle. Treetops. In the lofty treetops of Donkey Kong Country, you'll find a deserted town of wooden platforms and huts, origin unknown. But while the original inhabitants may be gone, the place is teeming with Kremlings and their friends, ready to ambush anyone who trespasses here. The barrel cannons are particularly tricky in the treetops.
And you don't mean the Earthwalker.
That's a little callback. The thing is, though, I feel like barrel cannons are going to be tricky anywhere, because a lot of the time you will die.
Yeah, the barrel cannons are particularly tricky in the treetops. Well, I think they're tricky everywhere, because you get blasted out of a barrel.
Yeah, like, even in World 1, there's parts where, like, if you mess up using the barrel cannons, you will just be launched to your death. That doesn't change here.
Now, the instruction manual says that the original inhabitants may be gone, and that the origin is unknown. Here's why I think this information is incorrect. Or, at the very least, was just flat out retconned later on. Like, the instruction manual has a few bits like this, that it doesn't really jibe with later games, or even Donkey Kong Country itself. There's a part when it discusses the mines, where it says that the mines have been stripped of ore. And then later on, you get to Donkey Kong Country Returns, and it's like, no, there's actually plenty of ore and gems left in these mines. These aren't just completely, like, deserted mines. They're still active.
Right.
And one of the reasons, like, within Donkey Kong Country itself, that I question that the Treetop Towns are deserted, the lights are on in every house.
Yeah, they wouldn't just leave those lights on if they weren't there. That would be wasting electricity, Hyle.
Yeah, okay. Even if you assume that there's no electricity in the Treetop Town, they use candles. Those candles would have been long burned out.
Exactly. Like, they wouldn't still be lit if this place was abandoned.
You could make the argument, well, maybe the Kremlings are using every single house as, like, a camp, and they've turned the lights on. You could say that. I think it's, again, a bit of a stretch. I think, like, Occam's razor suggests that no, there's clearly still a population, a pretty hardy population living in the Treetop Towns, both the one in Vine Valley and the one in Gorilla Glacier, at least at the time of Donkey Kong Country. And I think, again, Occam's razor, a Kong's razor would suggest that these are probably just Kongs living in the Treetop Town.
Hyle, do you mean like the Donkey Kong Country cartoon show?
Yeah, maybe, but like, here's the thing though, Dustin. It's Donkey Kong Island. There are so many Kongs that we barely know. And, you know, they're not all going to live in the Congo jungle. It's a big island.
Right, there's not enough Congo jungle for everybody.
And the Treetop Town just seemed like a very inviting place if you are a simian who's adapted swinging through trees. This would be right up your alley. This would be your alley. So
it is nice. I do feel like this would be a nice little place to set up.
Honestly, like, assuming there's electricity and, you know, like plumbing, like I can get a shower. This would honestly be where I would want to set up shop. Like, this is where I would want to live. Like, just give me electricity.
In Treetop Town?
Yeah. Give me electricity. Give me plumbing. Give me Wi-Fi, like a reliable internet connection. And, give me one of these little hovels in the tree, and I'm happy.
Yeah, the only thing you have to worry about is an occasional Kremling, like, just hopping around outside.
You know, occasionally Donkey Kong Island befalls some nasty invaders. You got the Kremling crew, you got the Tiki Tak tribe, you got the Snowmats. But I think most times...
most times it would be
peaceful.
good.
Yeah. Just not when the actual games are happening.
Hyle, do you want to know my weird head? And, like, this isn't necessarily something I still believed in, but for the longest time, I don't even know why, but my headcanon was this is where the Naughties lived.
Oh, the Naughties. Well, it could be.
I don't know why. I have no idea why.
Could it have been the
Other than you just see them walking around outside.
Could it have been that Banjo-Kazooie put it in your head that Naughties like to live in trees?
It's possible. That could be. I really wonder. Like, it's been so long since I've even, like, thought about that. And it just all came rushing back to me.
Here's the thing. It might not just be Kongs who call these treetops home. Like, especially after the fall of Crocodile Isle, I could see some, like, non-Kremling crew aligned Kremlings, like, move in here. I could see, like, Naughties, like Banjo-Kazooie's Naughty, just calling this home. It doesn't just have to be
it's not a Kong-only neighborhood. It's
not a monoculture. It's a vulture culture. But... Yeah, I feel like the instruction manuals always had a bit of a disconnect going on with the actual games until Lee Loveday was able to take over the instruction manuals. Dan Alson, who, again, did the writing for the instruction manuals for Donkey Kong Country 1 and 2, he did a great job, and he really contributed a lot to the, like, early play setting for the freaks like me who read the instruction manuals. But I do feel like sometimes he and Rare were working under different assumptions. And again, we'll talk about this more when we do the conversation about the instruction manual, but I would dismiss any, like, suggestion that the Treetop Towns are abandoned, because you just have to look at the game to know that that's clearly not the case.
Right. It's like you said, if they say something in the manual that does not go against what is in the games, that's one thing. But if you're playing the game and can see stuff to the contrary, then you kind of gotta be like, okay, well, game is what I go with over manual info if it's right there in front of me.
Yeah, you kind of have to tier this stuff in your head, and it's not like you just dismiss everything that the instruction manual says or everything that a German website says. You just have to kind of use logic when you're looking at all the information you're given about something. And again, you can also have headcanon. There's nothing wrong with headcanon if that enriches your own understanding and appreciation of the art form. It's fine. And never let me, the host of the Kongversation, editor-in-chief of DK Vine, or never let anybody on this website or podcast, like, say that you were wrong for believing something about these games.
It's all just
made
video
up.
games.
Yeah, it's all video games.
Yeah,
It's
who cares?
all made up. All we can do is provide our own interpretations, our own beliefs, but we're not saying you must believe this. If you think somebody else inhabits the Treetop Towns or that the Treetop Towns aren't inhabited, that's fine too.
Yeah, you think talking beavers exist in real life? Yeah, right.
I mean, to be fair, we don't know. We haven't found everything in the world.
That's true. I haven't met every single beaver in the world and asked if they could talk.
We should really get on that, though.
Yeah, what are we doing?
Time's wasted.
There's so many questions, so many mysteries to nature.
Before I check out, I would really like to meet a talking beaver. All right, well, before we, move on from the Treetop Town, it's the Ewok village from Return of the Jedi. There's no question. They just completely ripped that off. Right, it just is. When I
Maybe
said,
that's why I kind of headcanoned that Naughties lived there, because they're little fuzzy creatures like Ewoks.
Yeah, they're little buck-toothed creatures.
Yeah.
When I said you can tell the age of the people who made Donkey Kong Country and the era they grew up, yeah, I recently said on the Kongversation, so much of Donkey Kong Country is just pulled from George Lucas and Steven Spielberg. You've got the Ewok village, you've got the minecart sequence, which is just Temple of Doom. It's just
right,
verbatim. The idea is just pulled from that movie and reinterpreted here. But it's amazing because you can do that, and it is just ripping something off. But then Donkey Kong kind of makes it its own thing, independent of that. And now we've got a theme park opening up cross continents where you've got a Donkey Kong Country minecart roller coaster, which we never would have had if Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom hadn't done it. But
yeah,
it's wild.
I mean, I think at some point it's just everything is going to be inspired by something. Nothing's going to be 100% an original idea. As long as, they do exactly that, take it and kind of make it their own.
Yeah, Star Wars itself was inspired by Flash Gordon and Kurosawa, and it's just one of those things where one generation of artists will inspire the next generation, and then they'll run with those same ideas and make it their own, and then those ideas will inspire somebody else.
Exactly. It's a beautiful creative cycle.
It is, and it's one of those things where I think it opens it up in your mind. When I was playing Donkey Kong Country, this was before I got into Star Wars, so I didn't know, this was just an Ewok village. And then I saw, Return of the Jedi all the way through for the first time a few years after that, and I was like, oh my god, it's the Treetop Town! And then that was kind of my in backwards into Star Wars. It gave me something to hold on to a little bit, and make me
right,
appreciate
I know
that.
What this is.
Yeah,
I can latch on to this.
It goes both ways. So even though I just got done saying that the offshore islet isn't technically Vine Valley territory, it still falls under the purview of the world itself. So we should probably talk about it a little bit.
I think so. I think while we're here.
While we're doing this, look, it's going to be a while till we
as well.
It's going to be a while till we get around to Destination DKU Utan Island, so we might as well just talk about it here. Temple Tempest. It's the second temple stage, I guess the last temple stage in the original Donkey Kong Country, after Monkey Mines, and of course this is where the millstones give chase.
The millstones give chase. Yeah. I like that description.
I don't really have much to say. It's where the beavers.
It's pretty straightforward.
Yeah. Orangutan Gang really is the heart of Utan Islands. Because this is the big showcase for Manky Kong. It's where you first encounter Espresso. like in the actual levels themselves. It's like, it's got just a disgusting amount of bonus areas.
Mm-hmm. Which can be annoying. I love this level, but if I'm trying to do like a 101% run, that's where I'm kind of like, this is kind of a lot. You could do with maybe cutting 2 or 3 of these.
I think Orangutan Gang is also one of the more memorable stages just because it is a jungle at sunset. And
yeah, it's one of my favorite levels in the game just because of that.
It was clearly like the inspiration behind the original Congo Jungle stage in Super Smash Brothers, where
love that one as well.
Yeah, you've got the sunset background, and hey, their Neki is flying overhead there as well. Now,
yeah,
of course, that's the Congo Jungle. It's not part of Utan Island, so I don't think it's supposed to be Orangutan Gang, but it just gives the same.
But it's
vibes.
Inspired by
yeah. We already talked about Clam City, a city full of clams, but
city full of clams.
I do like how this is arguably, and I say arguably because we don't really know like where coral capers, if it's actually in a like saltwater pond in the Congo jungle, or if that's supposed to be like going into the ocean a little bit. The map is a little bit unclear there, but this is unambiguously you, Donkey and Diddy swimming in the ocean off Donkey Kong Island, which I appreciate that we have at least one pure ocean coral bed in the game.
Yeah, same. And Hyle, did you see all the clams there?
It's practically a city of them.
It's somewhat similar to being a city of clams.
And then the boss fight of Vine Valley. Now, it's on the Super Nintendo version, it looks like there's just a mountain of bananas in the ocean. And
yeah, I'll just put these on this rock out here.
Yeah, the Game Boy Advance version does clarify. It shows it a little bit more clearly that it is actually on this like jutting mesa out of the ocean that the bananas are piled up on, where this boss fight takes place against Queen Bee, the queen of the zingers.
I like this boss. It may be my favorite boss in the game, but well, besides K. Rool, but that's maybe because the bosses in DKC 1 aren't all that amazing.
Yeah, I think Queen Bee is probably the best out of the traditional boss fights. I don't, Master Neki Sr. maybe,
she's
but
okay.
Yeah, she's got some stuff going on, and of course, her lore is enriched when you get to Donkey Kong Country 2, and you like learn that the Zingers actually also have a king named King Zing.
Yeah.
So, you know, I love their little romance. It's a little
Queen Bee and King Zing are great names.
They are, and I really like. I want to learn how they fell in love.
Yeah, let me know the story of that. I think the thing is, Zinger designs are just so threatening looking on their own that when you fight this one that's giant, this huge spiky wasp, that's memorable. That leaves an impression.
Yeah, I think that Zingers are probably the most effective Donkey Kong baddie outside of the Kremlings themselves. I think there's a reason they just came back in Donkey Kong Country 2. Like, here they are again. We can't think of anything better than Zingers. Of course, then
we're not going to, like, pirate them up or anything. We'll just leave them as is.
Yeah, of course, then you would have, you know, buzzes in Donkey Kong Country 3, which are ridiculous and dumb, but I love them all the same. But Zingers are just like the purest, most terrifying baddie. If you are scared of bees or wasp or, you know, hornets, it's just like this perfect amalgamation of everything that makes you leery of them.
Yeah.
And I think that Queen Bee is definitely like the first time you really get the sense that there is like something going on behind Zingers beyond just being just stock like bee baddies in the game, that there's like, oh, here's their queen. I wonder,
they have their own little society.
Yeah, I wonder what their like colonies look like. And then, of course, we see that fully explored in Donkey Kong Country 2. So
I wonder what their daily commute to work is like.
Yeah, I have a litany of Donkey Kong spin-off ideas that I would love to see that I'm starting to lose hope that I ever will. But one of them is a romantic comedy about how Queen Bee and King Zing met. A meet cute, if you will.
I'm so on board for it. You've convinced me.
If it was up to me, there would be 40 new Donkey Kong games a year.
And that would be priority number 1.
Nintendo would just have to, put all their resources behind it to make it happen. But I think...
Right, well, we signed the contract with Hyle. I guess we gotta make this.
My argument is Nintendo fans are pretty loyal. They would buy them.
I think so. Yeah. They would just be like, well, they put all their money into these games. So I guess these are it's not like we're going to be getting a Mario game this year. I
really wanted a new Zelda or a Pokemon, but apparently they're making 40 Donkey Kong games. So I guess I have to buy all those.
I guess I'll give them $60 for the King Zing and Queen Bee game.
Yeah. They could call it Be My Honey.
No way you just came up with that.
Well, no, I've written the whole spec script for it.
Right. I forgot.
I've got a pitch. I'm pitching this to Nintendo next week.
This has all been planned out for the last 20 years.
Anyway, yeah, Vine Valley. Remarkably short time spent in the actual Vine Valley. By the way, I feel like we need to address this because neither Donkey Kong Country, the original, the Game Boy Color version, which, basically just brings over the map of the Super Nintendo presentation of it, or the Game Boy Advance version really makes it look like a valley. It's more just like a sloping hill.
Right. Yeah, nothing really valley-esque about it.
I think it's supposed to be as you go up the slopes to Gorilla Glacier, I think there's supposed to be an indentation within that is the actual Vine Valley. I do think it's supposed to be a valley, surrounded by hills on all sides. Maybe a very shallow valley, but a valley nonetheless. But They do a very poor job of communicating that. And I think they didn't really think it through when they were designing it, but they needed alliteration. And
right. I think that alliteration is what it all hangs on.
Yeah.
What can we name this? Vine Valley's what we got.
Yeah, which, I'm fine to headcanon it. I'm fine to, sledgehammer it in to make it work. But
right.
It's just looking at it, it doesn't really look like a valley. You kind of have to, squint. I imagine it's sort of like in Lord of the Rings, Rivendell. Rivendell, it's actually in a valley on the western side of the Misty Mountains, but you don't really get that sense when they're going around Rivendell. And it's the same thing with Vine Valley.
Hyle, you've got all the insights. That's why I like coming on this show.
Yeah, if you ever need Donkey Kong compared to Tolkien or the Beatles, or I'm your person. Call me up.
Thank you.
Now, Vine Valley might have made a brief appearance in Donkey Kong Country 2. This is debatable. I want to hear your thoughts on this.
Okay.
It's ambiguous. But at the very end of the game, spoilers, everyone. I'm spoiling the end of Donkey Kong Country 2. If you're just playing Donkey Kong Country 2 because they added the soundtrack to the Nintendo Music app, or you had to pick up the Nintendo Switch profile icons for Donkey Kong Country 2, and you had to play the game, and, you could just, load it up and then get to the, first little renderings of the rare wireframe, and then exit the game, and you could access the profile icons for Nintendo Switch Online. But if you're just now playing Donkey Kong Country 2 for the very first time, I'm about to spoil the ending of Donkey Kong Country 2. And that's something you might not want to hear. So plug your ears, go la 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 la.
I'm not listening.
For the next 2 minutes or so. We'll try to get through this as much as we can. But at the end of Donkey Kong Country 2, Dustin, when the
yes.
Kongs are watching Crocodile Isle explode from the safety of their own island.
Right.
They're standing on a cliffside, and they're watching Crocodile Isle go kaboom.
Right, they're watching the Kremling life source die.
Yeah, they're watching their little oopsie doodles. They didn't mean for this to happen, but they're watching the fireworks all the same. Yeah, exactly. It's like that episode of Family Matters where Urkel accidentally nuked Chicago. Turned out to just be a dream of Laura. It was a nightmare. But for a second there, you're like, oh, wow, Family Matters actually did it. They actually nuked
They're not
Chicago.
afraid to go there.
Yeah. Wow. Are they watching the destruction of Crocodile Isle from Vine Valley?
I don't know. That's a good like, there really isn't much way to know other than there are leaves.
There's leaves, and
it looks like it could be on that side of the island, though.
Here's my rationale. Now, I've gone back and forth on this, because when I was a kid, I thought that they were somehow like, you know, like how Dunkong's treehouse is up on a cave.
Right.
And I don't know, for some reason I thought maybe this was what was behind his treehouse. And it was just like jutting out over the sea. Like we would see like the fuller extent of his treehouse, or we were going to see it in Diddy Kong Pilot, in the 2003 build of Diddy Kong Pilot. And, turns out that there's actually nothing back there. But
right,
if you actually like look at the perspective of Donkey Kong Island in the background of Crocodile Isle, and you look at where they could logically see Crocodile Isle go up in smoke, I think it would make sense if they were on the cliff looking out from Vine Valley. And they've got that tree behind them that doesn't really look like a tropical rainforest or jungle tree. It looks kind of
right.
Just like
it's not one of your regular DK jungle trees.
Yeah. So I think this could be Vine Valley that they just like quickly ran to after they got back to Donkey Kong Island, and they're like, Crocodile Isle is having tremors. Let's go watch what happens. And They went to Vine Valley and they watched it explode. And of course you would think it would create this massive like tidal wave and, you know.
Nah, it's fine. Whatever.
Yeah, whatever. Oh no. We just completely escalated this war until the end of time because Butterfingers here threw a cannonball in K. Rool's blunderbuss and started a chain reaction.
Well, I guess that's what happens when you steal a gorilla.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it never would have happened had Donkey Kong not been kidnapped, which never would have been happened if K. Rool hadn't stolen the bananas, which, you know, again, it's just...
Right. You stole my bananas, so we blew up your whole island and way of life.
Diddy and Dixie didn't mean to destroy Crocodile Isle. It was an unintended consequence of the battle with K. Rool, but I'm sure they feel tremendous guilt over it.
Right, it eats at them every day, just as they eat their precious bananas.
So yeah, I do think this is Vine Valley. Now, it's a little bit... because the perspective of Crocodile Isle, it looks like you're staring at it from the front. Like from the view you've had it from it all game long, but that doesn't make any sense if they're back on Donkey Kong Island, unless they're on like a third island that's in front of Crocodile Isle. But I think like Crazy Kremland just extends to the back of Crocodile Isle as well, and you just kind of
it's a big theme park.
Yeah, it's like Crocodile Isle kind of looks the same from the back as it does the front, because who cares?
Yeah.
We're never going to go back there because it's been destroyed.
Yeah, it doesn't really matter anymore.
It's not like we have to save the whole back of the island for another game because, again, they blew it up. So I did talk about how we could see Donkey Kong Island in the background of Donkey Kong Country 2. And this raises my next point on Vine Valley, Dustin.
Okay.
Let's talk about the inconsistency of Vine Valley as it appears across various depictions of Donkey Kong Island, across renders, across map screens. and in Donkey Kong 64, because there is a structure present on some of the depictions, the early depictions of Donkey Kong Island, that doesn't always appear, but it does appear sometimes. And this has gone through numerous retcons and revisions. So, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
There is...
I think so.
Okay, so the original render of Donkey Kong Island, which actually wasn't used in the final game. The original render of Donkey Kong Island, as done by Adrian Smith of Rare, it's this beautiful depiction of Donkey Kong Island, but there are some slight inconsistencies with the final game. They did not have the final order of the worlds figured out when they made this render.
Right.
And so Krem Krok's smokestacks are behind Vine Valley, and then you have Gorilla Glacier, rather than having Krem Krok like on the brow of Donkey Kong Island after Gorilla Glacier, but before Chim Caverns.
Right.
So because of that inconsistency, like, they changed it for the final game. But on this render, you've got what looks like a Kremlin temple depicted in Vine Valley.
Ooh, you're right, Hyle.
Now, of course, the Kremlin temple that was eventually seen in Vine Valley, as seen in the level Temple Tempest, that was put on the neighboring island. So again, I think they hadn't really figured out how they were going to present the levels yet. Maybe they hadn't like devised the world maps at this time. And because of that,
this seems kind of like an early concept, just trying to get the general idea down.
Like, maybe they knew the general, like, order of the, like, levels in the worlds, but they didn't know how they were going to actually communicate that on map screens yet. And so, because of that, we'd had this structure on there, but then we got to the final in-game map, and it just removed it completely because it wouldn't make sense to have that structure on the island. You saw a lot more trees there. They removed the smokestacks behind Vine Valley, and then they added a few more trees where the temple was.
Mm-hmm. I like them trees. Have I mentioned that yet?
Dustin Jackson says, I like them trees.
That's my stance, and I'm sticking to it.
You're an uncomplicated fellow, Dustin, and that's why I appreciate you.
You give me a tree, and I'll do a big clap of my hands.
So, that's all well and good. But then someone screwed up. Because they put Donkey Kong Island in the background of Donkey Kong Country 2. And that's much appreciated. I loved that, like, in Donkey Kong Country 2. Because I was always about, like, oh, that's so cool that a sequel referenced the original. Like, I thought it was the greatest thing in Super Mario World when you explored the sunken airship from Super Mario Bros. 3. Like, I was like, oh, wow. Like, that's a reference. That's a reference to something
when you get
that
that direct continuity.
Yeah, and you've got it so seldom in Nintendo games that when Rare took over the Donkey Kong franchise and you got that in abundance, that's really what made me invest in this world, because I was getting that part of my brain fed. And I was like, me hungry, me want more. But
yummy, yummy.
They screwed up because they put the original Adrian Smith render in the background.
I see what you mean. I see them smokestacks.
The smokestacks are wrong. And I've rationalized this away, you know, in the past by saying maybe the swamp gas from Krem Key created this distortion effect. It created this mirage where it looked like the smokestacks were in the wrong spot.
Yeah, you know what, Hyle? That's probably what it is. That's probably what they had in mind.
They probably had that in mind, and they were like, no, we need to use the original render because you got to factor in the swamp gas in this one.
Yeah, easy mistake to make, but you got to consider the swamp gas.
Steve Mayles really put his foot down there, and he's like, no!
Don't you fools realize the swamp gas?
However, because they used that Adrian Smith render, if you squint, and I squinted quite a bit at the TV trying to soak in all the details when I played Donkey Kong Country 2 for the first time, you'll see that temple structure is there.
So
what do you do?
I see it.
What do you do then? Because we've already established Temple Tempest is on Utan Island. So what's this temple structure? Now, of course, Donkey Kong Country for the Game Boy Advance would later say the Kremlings did build some sort of architecture within Vine Valley proper. So if you didn't know anything else beyond the various sequels and ports and remakes to Donkey Kong Country, you could just say, well, that's what that is. Problem solved. However, Donkey Kong 64 then stepped in and said, don't worry, fam, we got your back. We're going to retcon what this temple is, because it can't be Temple Tempest. So what is the temple? What is this structure? Donkey Kong 64 put its foot down and said, this is not a Kremlin temple. This is actually the entranceway, the lobby, the gateway to the second world of Donkey Kong 64, Angry Aztec.
Oh my goodness.
Fuck me silly. So that begs the question, is Angry Aztec this bizarrely blistering desert that is trying to be Gobi's Valley, even though it's riffing off the Aztec culture, is it within Vine Valley? And that gets into a whole different matter over whether the worlds of Donkey Kong 64 are actually in their respective locations that's depicted in the overworld, or they're just these weird pocket realms. And, you know, when I was a kid, I was like, I guess they have to be pocket realms because Angry Aztec doesn't make any sense. But really, when you look at Jungle Japes, when you look at Frantic Factory, Gloomy Galleon, it's all relatively consistent except for Angry Aztec.
Right.
What do you think, Dustin? Where do you fall on that debate?
I don't know. That's so hard because, like, on the surface, it feels like they're pocket realms. Like, you go in that little temple and it leads to Angry Aztec. I can't really wrap my head around how that would work in actuality.
Well, yeah, Angry Aztec has always thrown me as a fan because it just feels so, especially of the Rare era, it feels so atypical of what we know about Donkey Kong Island. And it really just feels like it's shoehorned in. And I've always just hated it. I remember having the debate in the early days of DK Vine. And it was like, the debate was like, oh, did the Kremlings just tear down Vine Valley? Did they completely like deforest it and turn it into this arid hellscape? And I was like, I hate that.
Just said, get rid of all this, make it into temples, make it into this stage nobody likes.
Yeah, and I remember arguing vehemently in early DK Vine when we were having these debates because I was like, one, that just makes Donkey Kong Island inherently more depressing. Two,
right.
We're eventually going to return to Donkey Kong Island, and we're eventually going to return to Vine Valley. So you can't just say the Kremlings deforested it and then it got better. Like you've got
fine.
It's fine to have headcanon. It's fine to fan wank, but you've got to weigh it. You've got to future-proof it, basically. You've got to make sure that you're not writing yourself into a corner for the inevitable time when you do return and, oh wait, it's there. It's always been there. So I think that this might have been clarified a little bit more. And when I say clarified, it wasn't clarified, but I think we had a little bit of grace extended to us from Payon when they got their hands on the Donkey Kong series and they made DK King of Swing and Donkey Kong Barrel Blast in particular, because Payon did establish that there is desert on Donkey Kong Island. In fact, the second world of King of Swing. And I just got done saying I hate this. I hate when games do this. So this is one aspect of King of Swing where I'm like, all right, whatever. But the second world after the jungle was Wild West World. And then you have desert tracks in Donkey Kong Barrel Blast as well. And I think Jeff and I have like hashed this out together and we got on the same page. I think you can make an extremely belabored case, but a case nonetheless, that Angry Aztec is actually, it's not in Vine Valley, but it's accessed through this entryway in Vine Valley. But you're actually going beneath Vine Valley. You're going on a plateau that's actually underneath the forest line, the tree line of Vine Valley, but above the beaches and jungles below it. So there's this little plateau region, behind Donkey Kong Island. If we're looking at the map screen in Donkey Kong Country and we see those trees of Vine Valley, underneath that, behind it, going down, that is where the more arid region of Angry Aztec and Wild West World exist. And it's a stretch. I know, but it's the only way I can account for it if it's not just a wacky pocket realm. And the fact that King of Swing and Barrel Blast did establish that there has to be some sort of arid region on Donkey Kong Island, I think that lets us mash up all these different takes together and say that's probably the only plausible location it could be.
That was really nice of them to do that for us.
Yeah. Thanks, Payon. Thanks. Now, talking about this structure, though, if it is, and I do believe Rare did retcon it as the Angry Aztec lobby. However, it got a little bit more complicated with 2018's Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, because Super Smash Bros. Ultimate muddied the waters even more when it brought back the depiction of Donkey Kong Island with the classic Donkey Kong head on the side. K. Rool's Final Smash shows that in the space where Vine Valley is, in the space where that structure is, that Angry Aztec lobby is, they replaced it with what looks like a cabin or treehouse type structure.
I see it. I see the cabin right there.
And the only thing I can think of is they were working off this old render, or seeing as how they were specifically aping Donkey Kong 64, maybe they were looking at screenshots of it and they just thought, oh, is that supposed to be Donkey Kong's treehouse? Let's put a treehouse type building there. And obviously this is a vast inconsistency because this is made out of wood and the other is made of stone. However, I think if we just unclench a little bit, you have to realize that all map screens are merely representative of very broad stroke details. Even Donkey Kong 64's overworld, simply the broad strokes of Donkey Kong Island. You're not just walking across the entirety of Donkey Kong Island in under a minute.
Exactly. You're not getting all of DKC1 just in that one little hub.
Yeah, you're you have to account for time dilation. Donkey Kong might just walk across the entire perimeter of the island in under a minute, but from Donkey Kong's perspective, that might take an entire day or more.
Right.
So, map screens are just broad strokes. Even in this K. Rool Final Smash, we don't see many of the trees. We see 3 or 4 trees where Vine Valley is. Obviously, it's more than just a very, very tiny city park. It's right. Actually a robust, lush forest. So I think...
Well, even this part of that's supposed to be the jungle,
yeah.
The amount of trees that are there on that island, that's maybe one stage worth of trees.
Yeah, it looks more like
they can't just have all the trees.
It looks like more of a very small deserted island in the South Pacific than it does Donkey Kong Island, home of the sprawling Congo jungle.
Exactly. It's just here to get the point across.
Right. So I think that, yes, the Angry Aztec lobby is the structure that Rare occasionally referenced in their depictions of Donkey Kong Island, but the Smash Brothers cabin is just another building, potentially just a cabin in Vine Valley that you can rent as an Airbnb.
What if it's Cranky's cabin?
Because it doesn't look like Cranky's Cranky's cabin is always shaped like
You're
a barrel.
so right about that. You're so right. I forgot about that part where it's not Cranky's cabin at all.
Yeah, Cranky's cabin, we know what it looks like because it's shaped like a barrel, and that's actually pretty consistent even across the retro era. Like all of Cranky's buildings, from Cranky's cabin to the Monkey Museum to Cranky's shop, they're all shaped like barrels.
That's right. You had a good answer for that hypothetical, I guess.
I was ready for that one. So that's the end of the classic depictions of Vine Valley. However, that is not the end of Vine Valley itself, because Vine Valley did come back, as I predicted in 1999 on DK Vine, when I said, no, the Kremlins did not deforest Vine Valley. We have to future-proof this. 2010 did vindicate me, because Donkey Kong Country Returns, of course, took us on a grand tour, once again, of Donkey Kong Island. Now, it did it a little bit differently than the original game did. It broke down the worlds a little bit more broadly speaking, because we've said before how you can compare the worlds of Donkey Kong Country to Donkey Kong Country Returns and kind of figure out the general location and settings of Donkey Kong Country Returns. And I think the Retro Studios artists have also confirmed that the intention was you are revisiting the same locales as the original Donkey Kong Country, with some new areas of the island you've never been. But
right,
like the reason they give it such broad, loosey-goosey world names, jungle, beach, ruins,
factory.
Cave, factory. Yeah, the reason you don't have that lovely alliteration or just like lovely compound names that you do in the Rare era or even Tropical Freeze is because we are treading over same ground that we've already covered. So technically the first 3 worlds of Donkey Kong Country Returns are the Congo jungle. They're just different areas of the Congo jungle. There's just the jungle, there's the beach, the Congo beach. There are ruins within the Congo jungle, and then cave kind of corresponds to monkey mines, and then the 5th world, forest, corresponds with Vine Valley. And there's no Utan Island here. We spend the entirety of the world within the forest itself.
It's just the straight up forest part.
Yes. And if you need any more suggestion that they are supposed to be one and the same, the very first level of Donkey Kong Country Returns, forest, is called Vine Valley.
No way, Hyle.
I mean, this is not new information. This is 14 years old.
This is a game that came out 14 years ago.
Yeah, it's coming out again in January. I think that this is a gift from Retro, because I loved Vine Valley in the original Donkey Kong Country, but we spent so little time in the actual valley that having like 8 or some levels in this actual forest world really gives us a greater degree of understanding of both how it works, but also what the inhabitants who potentially built the Treetop Town were like. So let's just run through the levels. We'll talk about, we won't go in depth. This is not a walkthrough. I'm not going to tell you how to find the puzzle pieces. You can look that up elsewhere. But I want to talk about some of the indigenous wildlife that we encounter in Retro's forest, and how we can kind of mesh that with Rare's depictions of Vine Valley.
I'd love to do that, Hyle.
First of all, I love, and this is something I really love about Donkey Kong Country Returns, I love how each world starts off in the previous world and you like blast your way, or you enter the new ecosystem.
Same. I love that. I love seeing it transition into the next world.
I think it was most effective in the forest world because you're in the cave, you bounce off the mushrooms to get into the barrel cannon, and then you blast up into the forest, and then you're hit with the music, the familiar music, the remix, and you're just like, oh wow, like that is some effective table setting there.
It's so good. I love it so much. This is probably my favorite world in Donkey Kong Country Returns.
That's a good... I've never actually sat and thought recently about my favorite world in Donkey Kong Country Returns, but it could be this or Beach, maybe. I like that we spend a lot more time in the forest here. I like that we finally explored the Congo Beach. I also like the cliff world, the prehistoric fossil world, just because it's something new on Donkey Kong Island. But yeah, this could be my favorite world if I really.
I just love how gorgeous it is.
I think I'll have more to say about it when Donkey Kong Country Returns HD comes out, and I'm really able to reassess in a more contemporary frame of mind. But yeah, this could very well be my favorite world. I really like how, like, I'm not sure the vibe that Rare was going for, but this definitely, you can tell Retro is located in the US, in the Americas, because this does feel like the Pacific Northwest through and through.
Definitely.
And that really extends to a lot of the architecture you see, a lot of the sculptures you see throughout this world, because you've got a lot of like totems and like wooden sculptures, and I think it's clear that these are like old Tiki-Tak tribe like monuments, and because a lot of the totem poles seem to like incorporate the imagery of tiki buzzes, the flying baddies of the Tiki-Tak tribe.
Yeah.
And of course, I've already like laid out my logic for why there's a through line between the Tiki-Tak tribe and ancient Kong society. You can watch a DKU lore tour video on that, but there are like what look like wooden ape heads as well. That giant one in, was it Long Shot Launch that you blast through at the end? Like you blast through the mouth of it?
I think so. It's been a little bit.
Yeah. Really gives off that kind of Pacific Northwest, like Washington State, and then going into Canada, like Vancouver, British Columbia, you know, like it really gives that, that same vibe. And I love how, again, Vine Valley in Donkey Kong Country was a like darker aesthetic. It was a little bit dimmer just because of the thickness of the canopy. And this entire world is just like very little sunlight gets through, and occasionally you'll have a little bit like peeking through, and it's very effective. So you know it's still daylight. It's not actually nighttime. But I love like that very, very dense forest canopy.
Same. That's a big reason why this is probably my favorite world. I just love that visual. Just being totally surrounded by these towering trees.
So we're just rattling off the levels really quick. We have Vine Valley. We have Clingy Swingy. It's kind of where it really brings in Retro's take on Treetop Towns, because we don't have the traditional Treetop Town. We don't visit anything like that in Returns, but we've got different structures, different homes that we see in the forest, and they're like these huts that are literally hanging from the trees.
That seems very dangerous. I would not want to live in these ones over the ones in the original games.
Yeah, I would definitely take the Treetop Town over these. However, Dustin, the thing you have to remember, the thing about you and I, you and me, we are not monkeys.
That's true. Oh yeah, I forgot about that part.
We are not monkeys, we are not gibbons, we are not orangutans or chimpanzees. We are not adept at hanging from trees. We don't have prehensile tails. We're Butterfingers again. We would definitely blow up Crocodile Isle by mistake. So
right. We look over and we say, oopsie.
Ow. Tugging our collar a little bit,
Oof. Hope nobody saw that.
So, yeah, it seems very unsafe, but I suppose if you're used to always just living in the trees, then this would be very cozy. And it would have that nice swaying motion and a breeze that would gently rock you to sleep at night like a little baby.
True. I do like being rocked like a little baby.
Flutter Fly Away. That's the level where the tiki buzzes are like encased in platforms and you have to jump on them.
Man, Hyle, just looking at these levels, I hate to interrupt your naming off these levels.
Yeah.
But just being reminded, like, just how pretty I think these levels look. I can't wait to play these in the HD version.
I think it's often forgotten how pretty Donkey Kong Country Returns actually is because we compare it to how revolutionary the ACM graphics were for the original trilogy, and it seems to fall short compared to that because there wasn't that huge leap forward in visuals for Donkey Kong Country Returns. And plus it was all in the Wii, and the Wii is a very like muddy, ugly looking game console nowadays.
Standard definition.
Yeah. So even compared to the Tropical Freeze, you're just like, ew. But when you get good HD visuals for Donkey Kong Country Returns, you can really appreciate the details and how it does a lot of the same visual flourishes that Donkey Kong Country did, just in a different art style.
Definitely. I think it has very strong art direction. And yeah, it's another area where I think Tropical Freeze came along and just kind of said, we're going to do this, but better. Don't worry about it, Returns. You can just sit back. But yeah, I do think the very strong art direction for the worlds of Donkey Kong Country Returns kind of gets forgotten about.
Yeah. Like I said, I loved Vine Valley in the original. So just seeing, like, going deeper in the forest, that's what this feels like. It feels like you are like going off trail completely.
Mm-hmm.
Like maybe Vine Valley in Donkey Kong Country, Vulture culture, and like it's a hiking trail. Well, this is like deep within the forest.
Yeah, this is the areas where you should probably not be going.
Definitely, from what we see in later levels. By the way, I think that the like Flutter Fly Away, when I said that I think these totems are definitely like representative of the Tiki Tak tribe of yore. And you've got the Tiki buzzes incorporated in them. And then you've got Flutter Fly Away, where a method of transportation across the trees are utilizing Tiki buzzes, utilizing them as actual platforms. I think that suggests that, that's how they got around back in the day.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that, Hyle.
I mean, so much of these games, so much of what we call the lore of Donkey Kong, it's not outright communicated. You kind of have to put the pieces together yourself, study the details in the background and say, oh, so that, it means that, therefore that means this, and then you apply it to that, and okay, it all makes sense now.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's what makes it more fun. I feel like if it's just spelled out for you, it's like, it's kind of cool. But figuring it out for yourself, that's what makes it special. That's
why I really don't like the wiki culture of our like current era of all fandoms, where everything has to be spelled out exactly or else we just can't entertain it. And I understand wikis have to like keep to the facts, right? But so many fans aren't willing to then dip into it themselves. So many fans aren't willing to indulge that because they've just been trained, no, it has to be word of God, it has to be explicitly spelled out, or it doesn't count. And I think that
they read the wiki and they're like, I guess I'll take your word for it.
Yeah, and I think it robs fans of really discovering that same passion that really got me into this series, really got you into the series. And a lot of that is just studying the art and studying like the background details and like figuring out how it can all fit together in your head. And I mean, that's honestly, like 60% of my Donkey Kong fandom right there. So
Right. It's fun.
yeah. Tippin' Totems utilizes the aforementioned totems, as I said. By the way, I love how even when we're past the level of clingy swingy, you can still see the structures in the background. Like tipping totems, I know they're just hanging in the background there, and it's just a nice little detail. Again, world building.
Exactly. It's like, okay, we've moved on from that area, but you can still see them from where you're at.
So much of Donkey Kong Country games, really, they just relish the detail, and detail that it doesn't always serve gameplay. Sometimes you just have that detail to make the world feel more vibrant and real and fleshed out.
Right. It's fun.
Yeah. Tipping Totems also
I will say...
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, you go ahead.
I was going to say, Tipping Totems also had the hippopotamuses hanging on.
I love those hippopotami.
Yeah, when you talk about, they're actually called bopomotamuses in their actual given names, but it's my only really complaint. I love the hippos. I love the bopomotamuses, but I also feel like hippos don't really work in the context of this forest. We talk about how...
Yeah, what are they doing up in the trees?
What are they doing up there? They should be down in the jungle, down in the...
Maybe they're hiding from the Tiki-Tac tribe.
Or they were brainwashed by the Tiki-Tac tribe, and the Tiki-Tac tribe said, you've got to hang on to these totems, which is why they're so out of place.
That could be. See? There's a good reason for it.
Yeah.
Just gotta dig.
Just gotta dig.
But what I was gonna say was, I love this world, but one small issue I have with it, which is, it's more an issue just with Donkey Kong Country Returns as a game rather than just specifically this world. I do kind of miss the variety you get from the Rare games. Like,
sure,
go back to Vine Valley there, how you have the forest, you have the temples, you have Clam City, the famous Clam City. And here, like, all of these forest levels look gorgeous, but they're all forest levels. They're all pretty similar to each other.
It does tend to get a little bit samey and maybe overwhelming, or maybe underwhelming is the better term to use, when you're used to that diversity, when you go into a world and you don't really know what to expect.
Exactly. Like, it doesn't make the levels that are there any worse or anything. I love them still, but I like maybe a little change of scenery. And I feel like that's another thing Tropical Freeze does a little better as well.
Tropical Freeze does get a little bit better with it, and then to its detriment sometimes, because, like, I think of Bright Savannah, the third world, and I love the first few levels of that, where we finally get, like, savannas in Donkey Kong Country, you know, African grasslands, and I'm like, hell yeah, finally, and then you just kind of get away from it after the first 3 levels or so. And then it like maybe 4 levels. And then it falls into the same problem the original Vine Valley did, where you're like, I wanted more of that. And now I'm just, and now we're just away from it. But
yeah.
Oh, well, Long Shot Launch is a barrel cannon centered stage, and it has the aforementioned giant, like, ape tiki totem face that you blast through at the end.
He's so angry.
Yeah. I mean, you would be too if you had a gorilla and a monkey getting shot through your teeth. Think about it.
Yeah, that's true. To be fair, I'd get angry if anything was shooting through my teeth.
Yeah, but, you know, like, I love gorillas. I adore gorillas. I adore monkeys. I don't want them in my mouth.
Yeah, my mouth is probably the one place I do not want them.
One of my goals in life, one of my dreams, is to hug a gorilla, not brush my teeth with a gorilla.
Well, maybe once you do one, maybe once you get that hug, maybe the goals will shift a little bit.
He just squeezes some toothpaste on his finger and he's like, come here.
Yep, I know what you wanted.
And you know what? And I just let it happen. And I'm just like, you know what? That was actually enjoyable. That was actually a worthwhile experience.
That was a lot better than I thought it was going to be.
Springy spores. Just the conceit of that is you're bouncing on fungus. You're bouncing on mushrooms. And, you know,
I like it. I love those springy cartoon mushrooms.
I love the mushrooms in Donkey Kong Country Returns, and I love that there would be a lot of mushrooms in this forest. Anywhere that's densely forested and damp and like has a lot of dark places for mushrooms to grow, you will see like, and I love when I'm hiking in a familiar environment, because occasionally it'll look completely different because there'll be all sorts of mushrooms growing up at a specific time of year. And you're like, wow, this looks like completely different than it did last time. So I do appreciate that little touch there. My least favorite level in this world, and the one where I feel like the tonal ambiance of Donkey Kong Country games, it just smashed completely. I feel like this is more of a Jungle Beat style level than anything.
That's exactly what I was thinking too.
Wiggle Vine Wonders can go to hell. Because
I'm not really sure what they were going for with this one.
I'm not sure if they were completely sober for this one. Wiggle Vine Wonders, I understand, like they wanted kind of like similar to, I guess, the original Vine Valley world where you had the third world Forest Frenzy, and you're going across like the ropes that automatically move across the screen, right?
Right.
And maybe they were like, we want that, but we want to communicate that in a more like coherent fashion than just have this automatically like scrolling rope that you don't know why it's moving across the screen.
So we made it this weird living plant with a big toothy mouth.
We made it this big bulbous plant matter that has this propeller flower for a head, and it's got big human teeth in a mouth, and it's grimacing like a Ninja Turtles action figure from Playmates circa 1989.
That's so true.
Now, here's the thing, Dustin. I don't really hate anything in the Donkey Kong series, even the stuff that isn't really to my liking or to my taste. I appreciate and I embrace for how ludicrous it is. Professor Chops. I've learned to love Professor Chops.
Right.
Maybe ironically, maybe like with some reservation, but you know what? I see Professor Chops and I'm like, how you doing there, buddy?
You accept him as part of this world.
The more outlandish aspects of Jungle Beat. Cobcock, for example. I'm like, you know what? It's dumb. It's stupid. But we have a giant chicken plant in the Donkey Kong mythos. Why not have fun with it?
Right. See, I feel like that still kind of loses me. Like, Jungle Beat's a good game. No hard feelings against it with that interview that turned out to be false, but I still don't love Cobcock or what they're going for with it. But it's fine. It's whatever. It's so in the past.
Of course, it's not like I just unassumingly embrace everything, and I definitely have things I prefer over things I don't. Wigglevine are at the bottom of the list for sure. Here's the thing.
It's also just like nothing that fun or creative about it. Like Cobcock, I get it. It's this weird, bizarre ass, gigantic plant with a chicken head. There's something you can admire the weirdness on a level, but this Wigglevine, it's like, who cares? Like, it's just weird, and you could just so easily get rid of it.
I think like weirdness has to be earned. In a game like this. And I think like one of the reasons the more odd aspects of Donkey Kong Country 3 don't put me off is it was the third Donkey Kong Country game, the fifth in Rare's chronology, counting the two Donkey Kong Land games before it. And so by the time we got to Banana Birds or some of the more outlandish Kremlin Crew baddies in that game, I'm just like, you know what? Sure. Have fun with
Why
it.
the hell not?
Wigglevines, it's just no. No.
No, thank you.
Honestly, I would say one of the worst characters in the entire retro duology.
I think so. I think that's fair to say. I mean, I like just about everything else. To be honest, Hyle, I completely forgot about this stupid fucker before this podcast.
You know what? You know what I did? I did you a favor, Dustin, because now you'll be prepared for it when Donkey Kong Country Returns HD comes out, and you won't like throw your Switch across the room and smash it into several pieces when you see a wiggle vine.
Right. I'll just take a deep breath. I'll be like, okay, I'm ready. Let's go into this, and I'll be able to take it.
It's like the theory of building up an immunity to a poison. You just take small amounts of it until your body builds up tolerance. That's what we're doing.
Right. I need to take little sips of Wiggle Vine.
I wonder if like on Donkey Kong Island, like they ever like squeeze, like wring out a Wiggle Vine and get the juice and bottle it up.
And it makes that face.
Yeah, it would make that face if it was getting all of its juices squeezed from it for sure. Do you think when you when you squeeze a Wiggle Vine,
you're on Wiggle Vine milking duties?
Do you think the juice just comes out of its plant pores, or do you think it comes out of its mouth? Do you think
See, the way I pictured it was it draining out of the vine like a pee-pee.
Like a peep? Oh, it could be a pee-pee. It could be a little you just give it a good hard yank. Of course, you would think with a gorilla hanging on the vine, it would just be spewing it everywhere. It would just be letting it all drip out.
Well, that's why it's grimacing so hard. It's really trying to hold it in as to not have an embarrassing incident.
Well, it is No Nut November.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, it's like, oh, I gotta make it through this.
I've already lost. I don't subscribe to that. I'm just like, oh, it's November 1st? Whatever.
Same as every other day, am I right?
Same as it ever was, Talking Heads. The next level, I think, is the highlight of Forest.
For sure.
It's one of the most terrifying levels in any Donkey Kong Country game. Or, honestly, any platformer ever devised. Muncher Marathon.
You get chased by spiders in this one, Hyle.
I love it. It's so horrific where you go into this nest of spiders and you got all these spider eggs and you cause them to hatch all over the place, and then a big mound of spider babies chase you throughout the level. That's
a lot of spider eggs to bounce on.
It's wild. This is the kind of ludicrous, adventure serial nonsense that the Donkey Kong Country games were built on.
Yeah.
It's amazing. And
I love how you fall on the gigantic pile of eggs, and if you don't know, it doesn't immediately hit you, I think, that what you're interacting with. And then you realize, oh shit, they were Spideys. Oh no.
Yeah. I like how the game also communicates that this is just a long-held nesting ground for these spiders. And by the way, we're going to get into all the indigenous wildlife here. We're going to be talking about these spiders in particular, what they are. But I like that the wooden sculptures and carvings in Muncher Marathon, they hint the ancient Kongs who lived here and built all this. They knew this was a dangerous spider breeding ground, and they communicated that in the sculptures, hey, you're entering a place where there's always going to be a lot of spider babies, depending on the time of year. You might want to head back. This is
Spider Town.
Yeah.
This ain't no Clam City.
This is Spiderville. Spideropolis. Yeah. And that's just the kind of stuff I love, that it just suggests that it's not just now that this is a problem. This has always been a very dangerous region of Vine Valley, of the forest on Donkey Kong Island.
Yeah. Go here only if you want to be eaten by spiders.
Additionally, there is, of course, a Key Temple, a K Temple here. I don't feel like we need to talk about that because it's not really
it's in the temple. It doesn't really have anything foresty about it.
It's blast and bounce. You can look it up yourself. There is the boss fight with Mango Ruby. We'll talk about Mango Ruby in a minute or two. But then there is also the level Forest Folly in Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze. When you come back to Donkey Kong Island when it's been frozen by the snowmads, and you revisit all the worlds of Donkey Kong Country Returns, one level per world, you get to the forest region, the Vine Valley region, and you re-experience it in this frozen state, in this wintry state in Forest Folly. And I really love all the details here, all the callbacks to Donkey Kong Country Returns. You've got the hanging huts in the background, but they've got icicles all across them. You've got the totem poles in the background covered in snow. You've got the spiders that are frozen solid everywhere.
Absolutely love it. I love this level so much. I just love the vibes of this snowy forest.
Yeah, and again, because Vine Valley has always been going to Gorilla Glacier, but you've never actually seen it snowy or wintry there itself. So it's kind of a nice treat. Especially because by the time of Donkey Kong Country Returns, there is no Gorilla Glacier to speak of because the volcano went off.
You know what I think is very interesting about this level, and I only just noticed it now, it never occurred to me before, is this one really feels like Treetop Town because it has the same color palette. It has the blue background.
It does, yeah.
I was just looking at this picture and seeing the huts and the trees and being like, hold on just a second.
Specifically the Treetop Town and Gorilla Glacier, where a lot of the times what Rare would do to communicate things, if they were just of course they would just recolor the backgrounds, right, to set a different mood. And so if you were in a slightly colder environment, you just up the blues and up the purples, and then it just gives that colder vibe, even though it's just the same background that you saw earlier.
Exactly. It's perfect. I love this level.
So talking about the indigenous wildlife of Vine Valley, as we now understand it, thanks to Donkey Kong Country Returns and Tropical Freeze, the biggest thing established by Retro is that Vine Valley is just rife with the carnivorous plant life that they termed chomp plants, which I'm not crazy about that name.
We talked about these guys.
Yeah, I'm not crazy about that name because, again, Chomps was the name of a shark, a Kremlin crew aligned shark, and I don't like when they just reuse names like that without much consideration for what came before. But we've explained, you can massage that away. You can say oh well, maybe the plants were named after the sharks, or maybe the sharks were named after the plants. It's fine.
I like the idea that the plants are named after the sharks because they're these plants are they chomp things. They bite like a shark. They're like a shark in plant form.
Yeah, they've got teeth. Ouchies. Of course, I don't mind chomp plants though. And again, the idea of carnivorous plants kind of established even before Retro. Donkey Kong Country Barrel Maze, of course, arguably their first appearance. I don't need to say that. Everybody knows that. But
we all know.
You've got different aspects of it. I like the way they look different from piranha plants. They look a little bit less cartoony, but it's still very tropey. It's still very much keeping to, again, adventure serials or even things like Little Shop of Horrors. They look a
little more natural to the world.
Yeah. And you've got the big red ones that are like piranha plants. You've got the yellow and green ones. You've got the blue ones with the vine sticking out of the mouth, and then you hang on the vine, and then they start chomping up the vine, and they're pulling you in, and you got to get off. And you've even got the more fungus chomp plants that send out the spores.
Yeah.
And then I
like those guys.
I would argue that wiggle vines are probably an offshoot of chomp plants.
Some sort of weird variant.
Yeah, because they have teeth.
They do have the chompy mouths, yeah.
They have the chompy mouths, and they never actually chomp on you. It never comes to that, but I do think, given the wide diversity of chomp plant life that we see in Returns and later Tropical Freeze, and you could even make the case, incorporating the entire DKU, that the ones in Willow Woods and Conquer are also related to chomp plants. Yeah, wiggle vines, sure. Why not? Why not?
Yeah, they're the Lanky Kong of the chomp plants.
That is apt, my friend. That's the kind of analysis you're not going to see anywhere else.
Yeah, we kind of like to go there. We're not afraid to say what needs to be said.
Speaking of plant life, mango ruby.
What the hell is it?
I don't know. It's a plant for sure.
Right.
I've heard people argue, well, it's a caterpillar, it's some sort of snake, but when you actually look at it, it's got flowers for eyes, it's got leaves,
leafy head.
Yeah, leafy head. It's clearly plant matter, and I think maybe this is even more of an offshoot, more of an evolution of the chomp plant. However, it doesn't like light, which is weird.
Yeah, that is weird. Light is nice.
Especially to plants, you would think.
Yeah, exactly. But he's like, no, I don't want any of that. No, thank you.
It gets brainwashed by the pan flute tiki, and you have a little bit of boss fight with it. I don't know. I think Mango Ruby is weird just because it just seems like such a stretch. I like when Donkey Kong games at least like hew a little bit closer to the natural world. But when it's just doing its own wacky thing, like there's room for that for sure. But I don't know. I feel like Mango Ruby is just like when you have so many questions.
It's not as egregious as Wigglevine.
Not as egregious as Wigglevine. We're in agreement there. But I think that whenever you're left wondering and debating, wait, what was that supposed to be? Then it might have fallen flat as a concept.
Agreed. I agree. I don't hate it, but it does feel slightly out of place and weird.
Yeah.
And normally I'm fine with weird, but in a way that doesn't really fit.
You've got Squeaklies, the purple bats.
I like these guys
from the caves. Yeah, the purple bats from the caves. They roost in the forest as well. They've come up. I don't have a problem with these. We have so many bats in Donkey Kong games, and between Flip Flaps of the Kremlin crew, between the bats in Jungle Beat, and I got Squeaklies, and then that's not even getting into Banjo-Kazooie bats and Conker bats and Ukulele.
I think Squeaklies might be my favorite.
Squeaklies are pretty good. I think the Mega Squeakly, the Mama Squeakly, that whole sequence really sells Squeaklies to fans. It's like, okay, you've justified them.
Definitely.
Just like Queen Bee. Just like Queen Bee made us appreciate zingers all the more back in 1994. I think Mama Squeakly really said, oh, there's more going on with Squeaklies other than just their video game bats that attack you.
Yeah, we got a story to us.
I have to admit, this next one I forgot all about. And I always forget about this baddie.
Me too.
Cling Cobra.
It's a snake.
It's a snake that clings to the grass and the moss that you climb to, and then you have to avoid it. But it's just...
How do you think it clings to the grass?
It's probably got some sort of...
Is it wrapped around?
It might be it's got an abrasive belly. I don't know. I don't know, Dustin.
Maybe it has millions of little microscopic fingers.
That's horrific, actually. Just a tube of fingers.
Yeah, just seeing, it's you can't see them, but I'm using them to grip onto this grass.
By the way, there's a little bit of a discrepancy here, and I hate this sort of shit. So this is why I miss Nintendo Power doing the player's guides. When Prima took them over, there was just, I don't know what was going on, but These were referred to, I think, in the Donkey Kong Country Returns 3D Player's Guide. They were not referred to as Kling Cobras anymore. They were referred to as Wiggles?
Wiggles?
Wiggles.
That's the name of a clown.
That's the name of a vine.
Yeah.
And I don't know. It's just like, what are you doing, Retro? Like, or what are you doing, Prima? Like, where is the oversight here?
Yeah, have some confidence in Kling Cobras.
So I cling to Kling Cobra because that's a much better name than Wiggle.
Yeah, it doesn't wiggle. It doesn't like wiggle that much.
Doesn't wiggle at all.
Yeah, come on.
Toothberries, the weird little...
Love those guys.
The blue gremlin type balls that appear in the ruins, they're still kicking around in the forest, which makes sense. You know, they wouldn't just have like one spot on the island. They would probably breed and spawn and get up into at least Vine Valley.
Right. Some outlier toothberries that are not in their little temple area.
We've already talked about Boppomotamuses. I can't even say it. And again, they might not be native to the forest itself, but they're definitely transplanted into the forest. But
right, that's where you see them.
That's where you see them. You got frogoons and hopgoons, the established indigenous frogs of Donkey Kong Island that aren't like giant tree frogs that you can ride around on the back of. And then my favorite and your favorite, the spiders.
Hold on now, Hyle. I never said they were my favorite.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm putting spiders in your mouth.
That's my least favorite place to have spiders and gorillas.
Hashtag bring back the spiders. We did that. But
that's what you were building up to this whole time, saying that. I like them.
Yeah. Well, they're skidlers. Their name is skidlers.
Skidlers. Kind of like the candy, but that's a deadly mistake to make.
You don't want to make that mistake, because the thing is, there are purple skidlers, but they won't taste like grape.
They will taste like biting your tongue.
They'll probably be just as juicy, though, if not more so.
This isn't too bad.
So, of course, these skidlers are just the basic spiders you encounter, but it does include their babies, the so-called munchers.
Oh, man. They're creepy.
Yeah, especially when you get, like, writhing piles of spiders. Like, I like spiders. I don't have a fear of spiders. But...
Me neither.
I would definitely develop a fear of spiders if I went through the ordeal that Donkey and Diddy went through.
Yeah, I'm not afraid of just like one spider. I would be afraid of millions and billions of spiders coming at me.
An ocean of spiders.
A spider wave, one might say. An
arachnid sea, yeah. I'm not a fan of that concept. Like, I'm not afraid of birds, Dustin. But you put me in an aviary with a bunch of dozens and dozens of birds all flapping their wings around me, I'm gonna wince. I'm gonna be like, I don't like all of that movement. It's freaking me out. Get me out of here.
Right, and if you give all those birds knives, forget about it.
New phobia unlocked. Thank you.
Would not want to be there.
So yeah, Vine Valley, there you go. There's your little insight into the world of Vine Valley. I hope that helped. I hope that helped everyone, talking about a bottomless lake of 8-legged little biters there. But why don't we take a call? Why don't we take a call and hear what one of our listeners had to say about Vine Valley, and then we'll wrap this episode up with some final thoughts.
I would love that, Hyle. I would love to listen to a call on Vine Valley.
Woohoo! Here we go.
Hey, DK Vine. This is TJ calling in to talk about the world of Vine Valley in the original Donkey Kong Country. So I guess to start, I'll say this. From a gameplay standpoint, when I was really, really young, like less than 5 years old and stuff, and playing the original Donkey Kong Country, my family and I never made it to this world. We usually made it to like the first two worlds, and I just kind of take the controller and run around whatever handful of levels I could, like any 5-year-old would with the controller. But I didn't see this world until much, much later when the Game Boy Advance port came out. That's when I made it to Vine Valley and like the latter half of the game and beat it and stuff. And so, I missed out on, levels like where you get to ride Espresso. I didn't see the Mankey Kongs. I didn't get to face Queen Bee until much, much later. But, Queen Bee, she was definitely, in terms of the Game Boy Advance version, I felt like one of my biggest accomplishments at the time, beating her. It was cool seeing Espresso for the first time outside of the bonus world, actually getting to ride on him and stuff. And, it's a good world. It's decent. It's fun to run around. I like the levels in it. But in terms of its place in the world, I'll say this. I think there was a previous conversation I called into where I commented on Donkey Kong Country Returns, the supporting cast. I used to think it was weird that the animals in that game, there were squirrels involved, like just everyday woodland squirrels with hanging out with jungle animals, and I didn't think that really fit. But knowing that there's a forest on the island, that kind of softens me up to the idea that, maybe, the squirrels or the naughty beavers, the Vine Valley world is their home, and they just kind of, some of them migrate to the jungle, to the beach areas every now and then. So, I guess one more thing we could ask is, the level Treetop Town, the sort of Ewok-looking level, do we know who lives in those forests? Like, would you assume it's other Kongs? Because if we're operating under the idea that, only Kongs and Kremlings and bears are the anthropomorphic creatures in this world, I guess that leads you to believe that it's just other Kongs living there. But I'd love to hear what you guys think about that, who lives in the background of the Treetop Town level. So, not much else I have to say about Vine Valley, but thanks for taking the call.
Well, thank you for the call, TJ. I like your theory that we dubbed the primary squirrel you see in the background of those Donkey Kong Country Returns cutscenes. Matt Corna on the DK Vine staff named him Cyril. Just a very Matt
I like
Corna
that.
name.
That's classy.
And I like to think that, that would make sense. Those squirrels came down from Vine Valley, came down from the forest.
Yeah,
and,
I think that works perfectly. That fits like a glove.
I mean, it'll have to do, right? We don't have a better explanation.
Yeah, squirrels live in trees and forests. That works.
Yeah. And of course, to your point, we did discuss this a little bit, like who might live in the treetop towns. I'm glad you agree that it's not deserted. The instruction manual is wrong.
Yeah.
Also, I don't like that idea because it's just so limiting. It's so limiting for like building on the world. It's like, oh yeah,
well,
it's
like,
this really
don't
cool
worry
thing,
about it. No one lives there.
Yeah, this really cool thing doesn't matter. It just shuts down. It shuts down the discussion, and you're just like, well, that's not fun.
They're just levels you're in. Don't worry about it.
Generally, I don't like the thought of Donkey Kong Island being desolate and deserted. And maybe that was like the impression Dan Allison got when he was looking at the game. But I think later games have really established that it is a vibrant, thriving civilization. And
yeah, like, why would it be deserted? Why would no one, like, maybe there was like, there were people who lived there in the past and they deserted it. But I feel like at this point, people would have moved in. Yeah,
I mean, especially with like the modern day housing crisis. I don't think they have a housing crisis on Donkey Kong Island. I think they take care of people. But I think, there would definitely be people living in these perfectly lovely tree houses. Now, it gets a little bit bleak when you talk about Gorilla Glacier. If the volcano did take out Gorilla Glacier, then that iteration of the Treetop Town, well, it didn't end so well for them. But in Vine Valley,
I know who that is. That's the snowman. I know who Bleak is.
In Vine Valley, they're still living high and mighty. They're still living their best life.
Yeah, they saw the Gorilla Glacier Treetop Town meltdown. They were like, "Ooh, boy, glad that wasn't us."
But again, Donkey Kong Island isn't a monoculture, as we've said. Kremlings have definitely moved to the Congo jungle since the destruction of Crocodile Isle. I think it was the UK trophy description for Calypso established that she made a nightclub for like Kremlin refugees and migrants, and so the Kremlins have their own little pockets of civilization on Donkey Kong Island, like Little Crocodile Isle. And so you could say maybe some like benign Kremlins. I'm not saying like the antagonistic Kremlins following K rules every order, but just like Kremlin civilians, they probably
right, the ones who were like, I have no ties to K Rule one way or another. I'm just here to live.
We know there are decent Kremlins. We've met them. We've befriended them. Crunch, K Lumsy. So
we've played soccer with some of them.
Yeah. So, they could live in a treetop town now. There could be some bears who moved over. There could be other people from the Rare Archipelago, like Timber's Island after Wizpig's invasion. And he wrecked some homes there. They expanded outward, so we could have, for all we know, Pipsy lives there now. For all we know, Bumper went to Treetop Town after his brush with the law. You talked about how good it feels to be released after incarceration, Dustin. Well, think how good that felt for Bumper to move to Treetop Town.
That's why he's the most relatable DKU character.
Yeah, he also doesn't subscribe to No Nut November.
Yeah, exactly.
In the live stream chat, hello live stream chat, by the way, we've had several people pop in and say a few words. March Rose, Porygon Q, Freezer, Me Muppet, Luffy Dawn, and Just Andre. And Just Andre,
thank you all for joining.
Thank you for joining us, by the way. You can, I said I wouldn't plug the Patreon, but we have a live stream. We live stream these episodes for our $5 and up patrons. That explains the live stream. But Andre has left a few comments and questions. Andre, first of all, come after me a little bit for my pronunciation of Bopomotamus. They say, you can say hippopotamus just fine. Just replace the first syllable with bop. Stop replacing random P's with M's. Bopomotamus, 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 Bopomotamus.
You say that a lot of times.
Bopomotamus. You have to repeat a word so many times before it actually becomes ingrained in your vocabulary. And I realize over the last 14 years, I have not said Bopomotamus enough times to actually make it part of my vocabulary.
Yeah, who could blame you?
Bopomotamus. I'm going to practice. I'm going to practice before Donkey Country Returns HD comes out because I don't want to be caught with my pants around my ankles again.
We're going to wheel you out in front of everybody and say it.
Bopomotamus. Bopomotamus. Bestiary. Bopomotamus.
You're getting good at this.
Andre also says, the real question is forest where Laylee comes from? Man, I would have called in with that Laylee theory if I had the presence of mind. Well, yeah, wrote it out. So, the thing is, there's so many purple bats in the DKU, in the Rare Archipelago itself. I don't know if we could just pin down Laylee as a specific type of purple bat, and they're just, the whole island chain is lousy with them.
That's true. You can't take 2 steps without stepping on a purple bat.
So the thing is, I can't sign off on that theory, but it's a lovely theory all the same, because again, who am I to say your own headcanon is wrong?
That's so nice of you to say, Hyle.
Yeah, I'm trying to be a better person, Dustin. I'm trying to be a nice fella going forward.
I don't care what anyone says about you. I think you're all right.
What are they saying about me?
They're saying you're so cool.
Oh, good. All right. Well, I'm gonna take that unearned confidence and I'm gonna wrap it up in my final thoughts in Vine Valley. You talk a lot about like where you'd want to live or where you want to visit in the DKU, in the Rare Archipelago. And I've often said the Northern Hemisphere is probably where I'd most want to settle down if I had to pick, just because it seems like the most tranquil, lovely place when it isn't being, invaded by hostile enemy forces.
Yeah, I agree.
But if I had to choose on Donkey Kong Island, definitely Vine Valley. Definitely the Treetop Town. I would want to live in one of those hovels. Only if they had electricity, plumbing, and internet connection, because I require all three.
All the necessities.
I'm a rugged outdoorsman, but I'm also a pampered little baby. And, I have to have my creature comforts. I have to have electricity and internet to work, and I don't want to stink. I don't want to be a smelly little boy living in the trees.
To be fair, that's probably the best place to keep smelly boys. Keep them away from everyone else who can smell them.
We can keep the smelly boys in those hanging huts seen in Returns. And we'll keep the nice, clean, groomed, baby fresh boys in the Treetop Town. How about that?
This has been a File 2 production.
Que rico.
We talked about a fun forest.
Bopomotamus. Andre is saying I said it wrong. Well, you know what, Andre?
Yeah, that is. I didn't want to say anything, but you said it wrong many times. It's Bopopotamus.
Bopopotamus?
It's like hippopotamus, but instead of hippo, say Boppa.
Bopomotamus. Bop. You know what? I actually hate these more than Wiggle Vines.